Hi there, and thank you for joining me for today's live reading of War of Destiny, Book 4, Fallen Soul by Theresa Van Spankeren, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. I quickened my pace as I traveled the well-worn path between the town and my farm. The last traces of yellow and pink had faded from the western horizon several minutes ago. I should have been home hours before, but I had difficulty bartering for the items needed. As the rising moon cast a faint glow over the path, I noticed a stranger approaching from the opposite direction. He stared at me as we passed each other, making me uneasy. Moments later, he was directly behind me, biting my neck. I struggled to break free, but he didn't let go. Panicked, I swung my right fist into his face. The man released me and stumbled back. I felt dizzy, but struck him again and decided to retaliate in kind. I grabbed him and bit down on his neck. He flailed about, trying to dislodge me. Desperately, I bit harder and ripped his throat open. Blood gushed into my mouth. I backed away and hurriedly put a hand to the side of my neck, worried about how serious the wound was. My fingers touched warm, sticky blood, but it seemed the wound wasn't as bad as I thought. The man who attacked me remained motionless on the ground. I fled without a second thought. When I stumbled into the house, my wife, Caitlin, rushed to my side. Lane, what happened to you? I was attacked. A man possessed of wolves bit my neck. I fought him off. I think I killed him. Caitlin frantically pressed rags against my neck. A man from the village? No, no. I never saw him before, I replied. But he ripped into my neck like he had the teeth of dogs. We should notify Chief O'Malley as soon as the sun rises. Caitlin lifted the rags and looked confused. Lane, there's barely a scratch on your neck. He barely touched you, and you. I looked into her green eyes and said, I swear to you that the wound was much larger. I cannot explain what sorcery has caused the wound to become so small, but if I hadn't killed him, I would surely be dead. I don't know why, but I believe you. Did anyone see you fighting this man? I shook my head, and she continued, And if you notified Chief O'Malley of this, how could you explain killing this man when there isn't a wound to be found on you? He would accuse you of murder, Lane. No, we shall burn your clothes and say nothing. I squinted against the painful sunlight as I worked our meager crop of cabbage and oats. It had been 2 days since the strange attack, and I think I contracted some sort of sickness from the man. The sun was almost too bright for my eyes. I felt almost unbearably hot and tired any time I went outside during the day. My appetite suffered as well. Although I felt hungry, I left most of the food untouched. Yesterday was bad, but today it was twice as bad as there were no clouds. As the sun rose to the highest spot in the blue sky, I staggered toward the house. Da! My 2-year-old son squealed from where he sat in the grass as I approached. Caitlin appeared a second later, holding a pail of cow's milk. Alarm flashed through her green eyes as I stumbled and fell a few feet from the house. For several moments, everything was a blur of white and green. I felt my wife's thin but strong arms around me. The sound of her heartbeat roared in my ears. How could her heartbeat drown out the sound of everything else? The cows and chickens mooing and clucking, the wind, even my own heartbeat. Rory needs you. I'm all right. You need to get Rory into the house, I mumbled. I already carried him inside. You are not all right, Lane. You are sick. I will help you inside to bed, Caitlin replied. I had not the strength to argue with her. In a short while, I fell asleep in bed with several blankets piled on top of me. I awoke after dark to the sound of Rory crying. Shh, little one, don't wake your father. He needs his rest, Caitlin cooed. Sitting up, I saw her with the babe pressed to her breast. The fire burned low in the hearth, but despite the low light, I could see my son's dark blonde hair, the dark green of Caitlin's overskirts, and her fiery red hair. The clarity of what I saw was startling. I had believed I had good eyesight at night, but I had never seen color so clearly after dark unless the fire was high. I felt better, but I was so hungry. I got up and walked toward the table and fire, hoping to find something to eat. A pot of barley and vegetable stew was hung above the small flames, and a few pieces of venison sat on the table. I scooped some out and sat down in front of the meat. I forced myself to take a few bites, but it didn't taste any better than the food this morning. It didn't seem to sate my hunger any either. I'm glad to see you eat, Lane. I know you didn't eat any porridge this morning, Caitlin said. Don't eat the meat. It didn't cook enough. Rory was fussy and I was distracted and took it out too soon. I looked at the meat. It looked redder than what I was used to seeing, but at the same time, it smelled so good. It is fine, Kate. It is still edible. I quickly consumed the pieces, despite the fact that they still held some of the blood of the animal it came from. My hunger diminished a little, but didn't go away. I felt stronger, though, and helped Caitlin clean up before she shooed me back to bed. Although I knew I should sleep since I was ill, I found myself awake long after both my wife and child were asleep. I tossed and turned, got up and down some ale, but nothing seemed to work. In this time, I discovered that I could see everything in the house, despite the fire having gone down to almost nothing. I didn't know how to explain it. In the silence of the house, I could hear not only my heartbeat, but once again, the heartbeats of my family. Something wasn't right, but I was at a loss to explain what was happening to me. I must have dozed off for a little while because I was startled awake by the sound of someone moving around the house. I bolted upright to find it was still dark, but the hearth was brightening considerably as Caitlin stoked the fire. She seemed unaware that I had woken as she picked up a bow and a small quiver of arrows. She bent to light a crude torch, and I finally asked, "What are you doing, Kate?" She looked up, the firelight making her hair look almost scarlet. "I'm going to hunt. I'll be back in a few hours." "No, I will go," I said. "You should stay here and look after Rory." She stood, putting one hand on her hip. "You are too ill to go, Lane. You could barely walk yesterday. You barely ate a thing. I'm perfectly capable of bringing home some meat while you recuperate." "I'm feeling much better," I answered and stood up. It was true. I felt no dizziness as I pulled on my boots and walked to her. "I will go." She looked up at me worriedly. "You haven't felt well since that man attacked you. You feel better for a little while, but then your strength gives out again. What if it happens while you're out? What if you fall and strike your head on a sharp rock, or fall from a cliff?" I bit back a smile. "There are no cliffs close by, Caitlin. I'll be back by sunrise." My wife wasn't deterred by my answers. "A tree, then, perhaps?" "Highly unlikely. I've been climbing those trees since I was a small boy. Hand me the bow." She shook her head, but I pulled it from her effortlessly. A flash of surprise and something else crossed her face. She handed me the quiver. "You have certainly gotten your strength back. Please be careful." "I will," I replied. I also took the torch with me, but as soon as the house was out of sight, I put it out. It was hurting my eyes, and I didn't need it to see anyway. I ran into the forest and within a few minutes found myself at a favorite hunting place of mine deep within. I stood by a tree I loved to use as a hunting perch and stared down at my legs. Normally, it would take me almost an hour to get this far. Tonight, it was mere minutes and in complete darkness. I could see every root, stone, and branch that would have slowed me down. I tried to ignore the growing sense of unease I felt and climbed up the tree. I told myself that I was imagining things, although deep down, I knew this wasn't normal, just as I had noticed while eating that two of my teeth were longer and sharper than I remembered. A short time later, a deer came into sight. I could clearly see it bend its neck down to graze on the lush grass. It was a longer distance away than I would usually take a shot, but on a hunch, I aimed the bow and fired. My aim was true, and the deer dropped. I jumped down from my perch high in the tree, heedless of the height. I landed in a crouched position without injury and walked to the deer. It lay still, a pool of blood spreading from the wound in its neck. As I worked to process my kill, I felt my hunger suddenly double in intensity. I lifted my right hand, coated in the animal's blood. What possessed me to taste it? I had no idea. Before I knew it, I had licked the rest of the blood off of both hands. I was horrified to realize that it didn't taste bad. What was wrong with me? "The dream must be a bad omen," I grumbled. Although I had managed to evade my pursuers again tonight, I wondered if coming here was a mistake. For over 3 decades, I had traveled to distant lands, among them Egypt and Turkey. Although each of the countries I lived in had amazing sights, I did not go there for the scenery and culture. I observed customs and traditions, but learned only what I needed to survive before moving to the next place. I was simply a shadow in the night, fueling rumors of blood-drinking demons wherever I went. They're all true. I am a monster, a vampire. I've also heard rumors that some vampires have knowledge of how to feed without killing, but I've not seen proof of that. It seemed most know how to create another vampire. I know none of that. I killed my creator, accidentally being turned in the process. The details of that attack remained painfully vivid all these years later, although I preferred not to remember the days that followed. I hadn't realized at the time how much blood I had really lost, nor what getting his blood into me meant. Don't think of those days. I forced my mind away from the dream. Instead, I remembered Brian and Sean, the vampires who had taken me in. Their group had been young and killed only when feeding. None of them bothered trying to save anyone. They either didn't know how or didn't care. What little I had learned about being a vampire, I had learned from them. I still don't understand why, but my friends were murdered by a group of vampires loyal to the king of our kind, Valentino. I killed a couple of our attackers before the survivors captured me and brought me to him. Valentino sentenced me to death for killing his followers. I escaped by hypnotizing the vampires guarding me. It was something I had done only a few times before. Locked in Valentino's dungeon, my thoughts were only of escape. I pushed those thoughts into the minds of the vampires that guarded my cell. As I fled, I seemed to be unnoticed by anyone I passed. It took me a while longer to understand that cloaking was something I caused, something I could repeat. Now I'm an outcast, feared and hated by humans and vampires alike. Apparently, no other vampire can hypnotize others of our kind, nor have I ever met a vampire who can hide their presence as well as I can. I think that scares Valentino. That fear grew once I realized that feeding off other vampires was viable. Since becoming a vampire, I have mostly fed off criminals and murderers. However, a fair share of innocent humans have died by my hand because I don't know how to keep them alive. But why should they die when I could feed off other monsters? That's when other vampires really started to fear me. Valentino put out an execution order on me after I started feeding off other vampires. He sent assassin after assassin to kill me, all of which I evaded or killed. Last I heard, he was offering some sort of reward for any vampire who killed me, and many other vampires have tried to claim that price over the years. I wanted to disappear, and Valentino's reach isn't as far in places such as Egypt and Turkey. I was able to live relatively unnoticed for many years. But finally, I grew homesick for Ireland, the home I was forced to abandon. After so long, I had hoped that Valentino and other vampires would have thought I was dead. I made my way back to the continent to an area I thought would be far away from his supporters. I needed time off a ship to feed. Sailors die all the time on ships, but too many deaths would arouse suspicion I did not want. I arrived here in Rome about 3 months ago. It turned out I couldn't have chosen a worse place to go, except maybe Paris, Valentino's stronghold. The city is controlled by a group of 20 vampires. One of them recognized me within a few days. I'm sure it was the damn coat. I suppose it doesn't help with anonymity, but I can't bear to part with it. It had belonged to the leader of the group who murdered my friends, a bit of fashion that appeared and disappeared so quickly in that part of Ireland that it is considered peculiar. I had hunted the group for weeks, picking off their members, building on their fear before finally killing the leader and taking it as a trophy and a tribute to the only friends I ever had. Rome's group has attempted to claim the price on my head several times now. The last time they attacked, I killed their leader. I had hoped that would have made the group flee or leave me alone at least. It's worked in the past. Instead, 2 members of Valentino's council showed up to take over the group and lead the hunt for me. It was a development I had not foreseen. He had sent vampires after me before, but they were never part of his council. These vampires were much older and stronger. Tonight, I had spent the first part of the night evading their search parties, wanting a place where I could feed without being ambushed. A section of eastern Rome provided me with an area with no other vampires nearby. As I searched for someone to feed off, I considered what I should do next. Staying in Rome was becoming more trouble than what it was worth. Florence and Milan were both cities to the north, but that would also bring me closer to France and Valentino. If Rome, a city so far from Paris, was controlled by him, the chances were those cities were as well. Maybe I should go south to Naples and leave from there to continue my journey to Ireland. I was startled out of my thoughts by a slender hand on my shoulder. I sensed the vampire behind me abruptly through the telepathy. Instinctively, I snarled and knocked their hand off, even as I wondered how the hell another vampire managed to sneak up on me without my noticing. I hadn't been that deep in thought. Had I? That was stupid, Lane. I sized up the vampire. It was a woman with coloring I hadn't seen in many years. Pale skin, red hair. Just looking at her, she could have passed for an Irish Calleen. For a split second, I thought it was Caitlin, but they weren't dark green eyes staring at me, but pale blue. Before I could regain my senses enough to draw my sword, she stepped back with a curse. A runner, then. Not all vampires attack me. Some run away from me instead. I blinked as the woman said, "Pray pardon." Did she just apologize to me? I stared at her in disbelief. I never had anyone apologize for nearly attacking me. Was she a young vampire? She looked around 20 years old, but that's an illusion most vampires have. No, the power I sensed through the telepathy told me she had been a vampire about as long as I have, maybe a little longer. Theoretically, she should know who I am. It was hard to sense her age at first. She was good at shielding herself. Not as good I was, but better than most. She also seemed stronger than most vampires I've seen around our age. I let my arm drop to my side. She didn't appear to be a threat, at least in the moment. Bewilderment filled her eyes, but she still didn't run. For the first time in ages, I felt amusement. I couldn't remember the last time I dealt with a vampire who wasn't trying to kill or flee from me. Why the hell couldn't I sense you? She demanded. I remained silent as I noted her accent was wrong. She wasn't Irish. English, perhaps? I searched the area telepathically for other vampires, but the woman was alone. That was another oddity. Most vampires I'd encountered tended to hunt and live in groups. I'd met a couple who were alone, but they were even more mad than I was. I couldn't make sense of what they said most of the time. This vampire sounded too normal to be a loner. So why was she by herself? Are you part of Rome's group? She questioned with a slight frown. Interesting. She was worried I was part of Rome's group, which meant she obviously was not. And it also meant she really had no idea who I am. This was a question I could answer. No, I am not, I replied. Surprise crossed her face for a moment, and I guess she thought I didn't understand the language. Thank the Lord for small favors. What are you doing here? I frowned at her. That was the stupidest question I heard her ask. Trying to feed? I replied crossly. She closed her eyes as a faint blush reddened her pale skin. Apparently, she realized as well how stupid a question that was. When she reopened them, she rephrased her earlier question. For the sake of clarity, you have no connection at all with the group who lives here? She seemed awfully curious about my allegiances. Was she a spy, acting like she didn't know who I was? I narrowed my eyes and replied, No. Why? I didn't know what reaction I expected, but the smile that suddenly lit her face was not it. Good. Please do not tell them you saw me. I am trying to avoid a confrontation while I am here. Good hunting, she said, and turned back the way she came. I stared after her as she walked down the street, out of sight. What the hell happened? A vampire just interacted with me as if I wasn't the insane loner most think I am. I replayed our encounter in my mind, trying to figure out an explanation. How did I not sense her approach? Rome's group had been after me all night. I couldn't have possibly let my guard down that much. Was it possible she really hid her presence as well as I do, but her shielding simply slipped? It was possible, but I have never seen it. I frowned and scanned the area. I was alone again. I resumed my search for a meal, going the opposite way the woman disappeared in. A couple of streets down, I found a man standing over another. He was stuffing into his pocket the money of the fallen man. Smiling, I sauntered up to the man. I never said a word. I didn't have to. As soon as my eyes met his, the human was entranced. I bit his neck and drank until there was very little blood left. As I let the man drop, I slit his throat, ensuring the blade went through my teeth marks. A little blood seeped out of the wound and mingled with the blood of the man already dead on the ground. I was no idiot. I had learned to conceal my kills so stories of blood-sucking demons did not follow me as much as they used to. I had no desire to attract the attention of humans who hunted vampires, although they tended to ignore me if we knowingly crossed paths. They saw no reason to attack me if I was killing others of my kind. All the same, if they discovered I was killing humans, their attitude might change. It was better if they didn't know. It was nice not to worry about them hunting me as well. The night was growing short. I headed for my resting place in the woods, a small structure reclaimed by the trees. As I lay down to rest, I couldn't get the encounter with the female vampire out of my head. How strange was it that I had dreamed of Caitlin for the first time in decades just a few nights ago? The woman reminded me of her. Was it just her physical appearance? She didn't run from me. Why? Who was she? Her last words replayed in my mind. Please do not tell them you saw me. I am trying to avoid a confrontation while I am here. I had heard rumors of opposition to Valentino, but if I encountered any of those vampires, they always treated me the same as his followers. It made the encounter with her all the more puzzling.